This is not the video I planned to make about this 1986 Sanyo stereo system. I intended to include it as part of a video on another topic, but first I needed to get its cassette decks working again, because actually for the past few years they haven't been, but I didn't pay much attention to it because I have better cassette decks I can use, and I figured it just needed new belts, which on a simple mechanism like this is really not worth making a video about. In fact, it takes longer to open the cabinet than it does to change the belts. But when I did open the cabinet, I discovered that the original belts are still perfectly fine. Maybe a little bit loose, but they're certainly not broken or melting or anything. They're still perfectly intact, and it should be functional. But yet it's not. When I hit play or any other function, I can hear the motor running, but the tape doesn't move. The problem is not with the belts or the motor. You see this white plastic post with a spring on it? It's not supposed to be sticking out like that and rubbing against the flywheel. That's what was keeping it from turning. It turns out this plastic post is actually part of the pause button mechanism. I can give you a better look at it in this mechanism I took out of a cheap new boombox. Here's the pause button, and when I push it in, you can see this arm moves back and forth to latch and unlatch the pause function. And as part of that, there's that white plastic post with the spring on it. But you can see in this case, there's plenty of distance between it and the flywheel, so it's not rubbing. And that's the way it's supposed to be. Here's another cassette deck which has the pause button mechanism in clear view. It's not hidden underneath the flywheel, so we can get a better look at it. There you can see that white plastic collar, the spring, and there's a black plastic peg it's mounted on. And the only thing keeping this collar on the peg is friction. It's simply a friction fit. And what happens over time is that black plastic peg slightly shrinks over time, causing the collar to pop off due to the spring tension. And when it's free like this, not covered by the flywheel, this thing just pops off entirely with the spring along with it. You end up with loose parts rattling around inside your cassette player, and your pause button no longer works. But otherwise, the cassette player is unaffected because it can still rotate. Whereas in the Sanyo player, it tried to pop off, but it got blocked by the flywheel. So that's what happened here. This white plastic collar is no longer fitting on the black plastic peg it's mounted on. But I have a way to fix that. Unfortunately, to get to that, I'll need to remove this entire mechanism, unplug all the wires going to it, take off the belts, and remove this flywheel. And I did actually order new belts because that's what I thought the problem was in the first place. So I'll put the new belts on anyway, even though it doesn't need it. Better to do it now than have to take it apart and do it again later. I removed the mechanism and took the belts off the flywheel. This one came off entirely. The other one is trapped by that pause mechanism that's pressed up against the flywheel. So I need to remove the flywheel now, which is permanently attached to the capstan shaft, which is what actually pulls the tape through the mechanism. And that's held in place with a tiny washer there that you need to pry off. There you can see the washer is actually split, so you have to try to open up that gap and pry it off. It's not difficult to do, but it's very small and you have to be careful not to lose that. So now I'm going to try to do it on camera, which may be easier said than done, because it's always more difficult to do something intricate like this when you have a camera in the way. Okay, now I got it off. I just need to carefully pull it, and there it is. Oops, don't worry, I didn't lose it. There it is. So now I can remove that flywheel, and hopefully that pause mechanism thing won't go flying. Okay, there it is. Just remove this flywheel entirely. Take that other belt off. And there's the parts we need to fix. So there it is, the white plastic collar and the spring. Don't lose that. There's that black plastic post it fits onto, and this is the other part you don't need to lose. That's what actually operates the pause mechanism. And here's what I'm going to use to fix it. Regular old-fashioned slow drying clear glue, not super glue. I discovered the hard way that if you try to use super glue, it's too thin and it seeps out of this collar and onto the spring, and you don't want to glue that spring. If you do, your pause button is going to jam, and you push the button to pause it and it's going to stay pushed in. So you want to use this glue because it's thicker. It will not leak out of that collar and onto the spring. It'll stay in place holding the collar onto that black plastic post. I'm going to use a toothpick to add a little drop of glue. Actually, this is probably too much, so I'm going to try to wipe some of that off. Add a little drop of glue inside that cap. Maybe one more little drop of glue in there. Thing is, you don't want it to spill out side of that, so that may be actually a little bit too much. Now I'm going to use a pointed cotton swab to try to wipe off any excess. We just want the glue inside the cap, not on the outside of it. There, you can see I already got that spring on the peg, so now I just have to put the cap on it. And there it is. There's the pause button working. And this is slow drying glue, so I'm going to leave it in place for at least an hour before I reassemble everything. And now from that side angle you can see it's not sticking out as far as it was before, so now it should not rub against the flywheel. In fact, we can test that right now. Oops. Yeah, make sure you put that washer there. See, there's the flywheel, and there's enough gap that it's not going to rub. So just let it dry and then I'll finish reassembling. Okay, so it's been a couple hours since the last clip. I installed the new belts even though the old ones were still fine. It still spins freely without any interference from that pause mechanism that I glued back in place. Not much clearance, but there's enough that it doesn't rub. And more importantly, the pause button is now working perfectly. While I have this whole mechanism out and have good access to it, I took the opportunity to clean the head and the capstan and pinch roller and the part of the buttons here which are normally hidden by the bezel, so I could get all the dirt out of that. Now I just need to install that little washer on the capstan shaft. There it is, and I think the best way to do this is you have to hold the flywheel from the back so it doesn't pop out. But you want to try to get it onto the capstan and just lower it down until it clicks into place, like I believe it just did. Yup. See, that gap is a little bit wider than before, but as long as that's holding in place, it should be fine. And it is in that little notch where it belongs. So that's the easy way I found to put it back on. You put it on the tip of the capstan shaft and you just slide it down until it clicks into place. And now this whole mechanism is pretty much complete. We just need to reinstall it and test it out. The repaired mechanism is now reinstalled and connected. And I actually already did the other one yesterday, which is how I was able to learn from my mistakes. It's all back together now, and for the first time in actually a couple of years, I can use this system to play tapes. And the pause button works. Same thing with the right side deck. and all it took was adding that little drop of glue to repair the pause button mechanism. The right side playback only deck has automatic tape type detection for chrome and metal tapes, as it says right here on the door. But the strange thing is the left side recording deck can only record on normal and metal tapes. It does not have a chrome position. I thought maybe the metal position would also work for recording on chrome tapes, but sure enough here in the manual, it only mentions recording on metal and normal tapes. It says you can play chrome tapes with the switch set to the metal position, but it doesn't say anything about recording on chrome tapes. And again, in the specifications, it lists the frequency response for normal and metal tape, but does not list chrome tape. You may have noticed this button labeled bias mode, but that's a misnomer. It has nothing to do with whether you're recording on normal or high bias tape. This is better known as a beat cut switch for recording from AM radio. As explained in the manual, it says when recording from an AM station, interference in the form of a beat, howling, or whistling may sometimes appear. In this case, simply set this switch to the other position.
The other part, Mary Louise, when you're talking about the simplicity.
For example, I'm recording from a station on 8:20 AM and maybe you can hear that annoying whistle in the background. But if I push this button, the whistle disappears. Conversely, there are some other frequencies where you get a whine with the button pushed in, but releasing it gets rid of the whine. And now I'm ready to do some high-speed dubbing. It has synchro start, so it doesn't actually start recording on this deck until I put my source tape into this deck and hit play. I wonder if you can get a copyright claim for playing a song at twice the normal speed. I'm glad I was able to get both cassette decks in this 1986 Sanyo stereo system fully working again, because I'm very fond of this system, and I'll leave you with some music I've recorded using it on Sony XR Type 4 metal cassette tape.